Yo, Robert Ferringo of Doc Sports here with the next team on my 2023 NFL Power Rankings countdown. Today we are talking about the number 19 team in my Power Rankings, the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Minnesota, God, this is one of the most interesting and, for me, most dangerous teams in the NFL heading into the season because I just don't know what to make of them. Now, we can't look forward to this year's Minnesota team without talking about what they did last year, right? Now, sports and sports betting it's a binary operation, right? It's a bottom line business. Either you win or you lose. Everything else is just excuses. Now, unfortunately for me, my job as a sports handicapper is to figure out the excuses, right? Why did things happen? How did they happen? That will help me determine if they will happen again in the future. Because when you think about it, that's what sports handicapping is. It's assessing value and risk management and stuff like that, but we are trying to predict the future. Not an easy gig, right? So you have to understand how and why something happened to be able to determine if it's going to continue to happen. So when we look at Minnesota last year, the word luck is the first thing that comes to mind, right? They were lucky. That was it. And it's really hard to argue and say that they weren't. They set an NFL record by going 11-0 in one-score games. They were 13-4 in the regular season, despite getting outscored on the year. That's right. They had a negative point differential. Their Pythagorean win expectation was 4.6 wins fewer than what they actually got. They actually played like an 8-9 team. Instead, they went 13-4. So they were lucky. Right? Well, that's a little bit reductive. It kind of diminishes their accomplishments. And after all, their coach famously said, "You are what your record says that you are." Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. The problem is, absolutely everyone and their sister looks at the 2023 Minnesota Vikings and they see the same thing. They see a team that is primed for regression. They see a team that was not as good as its record stated that it was last year, and they are due for a fall this season. And I agree. Look, I'm a mathematics guy. I follow the numbers, and the numbers are telling me sell on the Minnesota Vikings. The problem is they still got some guys that can play, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Justin Jefferson became just the third Minnesota Viking in history to win the Offensive Player of the Year. They went out and drafted Jordan Addison to give him a running mate with KJ Osborne. That mid-season trade last year to get TJ Hawkinson. People always overestimate the impact of NFL players being traded within the season. It's hard going from one offense to the other, from one scheme to the other. So I really think we're going to see big dividends out of Hawkinson and that fantastic deal that they made this season for Minnesota. Kirk Cousins, look, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on Kirk Cousins. By now, you know who he is and what he is. And the bottom line is, he is a top 10 or top 12 quarterback in the NFL. He just is. The guy's 70-56 as a starter. He won 13 games last year. He's taken multiple teams to the playoffs. The guy can play, all right? He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not going to be. You can win, obviously, with a guy like Kirk Cousins. And for the sake of what we're discussing, season win totals, value heading into the season, I don't need Kirk Cousins to win a Super Bowl. I hope he doesn't. I'm a Bears fan. I hope the Minnesota Vikings never win a Super Bowl, okay? But that's not what we're talking about. Can Kirk Cousins get them over that 8.5 win number that Las Vegas has posted for this team? Minnesota has a very good offensive line that underachieved a little bit last year. I believe it's all 5 of their offensive linemen were either first or second round draft picks last year. They got the tight end, they got the receivers, they got Jefferson, they got the good quarterback. They're going to put up some points last year. That's the bottom line. They were number 7 in the league in scoring, number 8 in total offense last year, and they did that despite being number 28 in rushing offense. Everyone's so surprised they didn't re-sign Dalvin Cook. Look, they were number 28 in rushing last year. That's not all on Cook, but he obviously didn't overcome some of the other issues. So if they run the ball a little bit better, I don't think it's beyond the realm to expect Minnesota to have a top 10 offense again this year. This team's season is going to be defined by what happens on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, last year they were easily one of the worst defenses in football. They were number 31 in total defense and yards allowed, and they were number 28 in points allowed. So think about that for a second. They won 13 games with one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL. If they can just improve to, say, middle of the pack, somewhere in that 14 to 18 total defense range, they really might be in business here. Okay, they brought in Brian Flores, well-respected defensive coordinator. One of the things I feel like was a little bit overlooked last year was the fact that Minnesota, they have been a long time 4-3 base defense, and last year they made the switch over to the 3-4. Now, Brian Flores is a 3-4 guy. This is still Minnesota's second season, just their second year running the 3-4. So you had a lot of square pegs trying to fit in round holes. You had a lot of personnel that just didn't fit. So when you look at what happened in the offseason with some of the guys they lost, like Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendrick, Patrick Peterson, and Zadarius Smith, maybe these guys just didn't fit what they want to do in that 3-4. And can Brian Flores kind of scheme around some of the young parts that they have? If they improve on defense, they're good enough offensively to really be a factor, not just in the NFC North, where their odds are plus 300. You can get 3-1 on them to repeat as Northern champions. They could be a factor in the NFC proper. Now, the problem on the defensive side of the ball, besides do they have the talent, do they have the players to fit the scheme, is there is no depth. Their starting 11 is still pretty solid back there. But if there's a run of injuries on Minnesota's defensive side of the ball, they're in really, really big trouble, okay? So they still have a top 10 offense. They could have an improved defense. What do we see? What do we think about that 8.5? If I'm going to make a mistake with this team, I'm going to make a mistake on the side of math, okay? The math says that 11-0 in one-score games and 5 wins over your Pythagorean wins expectation is completely unsustainable. They're not going to be able to do that again. I also happen to like Chicago and Detroit a little bit more than I like Minnesota. So if I have Minnesota slotted in as a third-place team in the NFC North, are they going to win 9 or 10 games? I'm going to have to say no. However, I am gonna offer this one little caveat here. I'm taking the under. That's my play on the season win total. But just be careful with Minnesota this year. I feel like everyone in the bobblehead media, every analyst, every bettor, everyone thinks the same thing about this team. And a lot of it's what I just said in this video, so I guess I'm just as guilty of it. That, last year was a fluke. They're not that good. They're not going to be that good. In a vacuum, if we throw out what happened last year and just look at this team, there's some pieces. There's some talent here. There's some capability here. So this one isn't going to be a bet for me. This isn't a season win total that I'm going to release to my clients or that I'm going to bet. And I don't advise you to either, frankly, because when I look at this, this is kind of a dangerous team with kind of a dangerous number. So, all right, that's it. That's the Minnesota Vikings. Be sure to check back tomorrow for the next team on my NFL Power Rankings countdown. Until then, carpe diem and good luck.